Push Pass Nation. Come on in, check in, post a comment, let us know that you're here. Simone Matthew here, and today Mr. Paul Barron is joining us. We get about 10,000 visitors a month on this platform. And of course, we want to use the platform to continue to promote our Dominican businesses, our culture, our people. But I was also thinking that we need to ensure that we're having and we're keeping the focus on some very important topics. And one of those topics in particular that is near and dear to my heart is youth unemployment, development. So I was quite elated when Mr. Paul Barron reached out to me and said, hey, let's do a program on youth development. Let's just kind of check in and see how things are in Dominica and maybe look at some recommendations. So I'm hoping to engage you as well in the conversation as you're coming in. Don't forget to share the live. Let everyone know that we are here. If you see that little notification button pop up to say follow Push Past, then make sure that you do so that you don't miss any of the programming. I hope that you got a chance to look at the one-on-one interview with Thompson Fontaine that I did yesterday, April 27th. So if you haven't had a chance, you certainly want to check out that interview. But yes, like I was saying, we want to make sure that we're using the platform to ensure that we're touching on and we're keeping on the forefront some very important topics. And in my mind, youth development is certainly one of those important topics. So Mr. Paul Barron is here. He is joining us and he wants to kind of just tell us what he's seeing on the ground, what role he is playing in terms of going to the schools, and what are some of his recommendations. So Paul, great to see you. Welcome to the program.
Hi, good evening, Simone, and good evening to your listenership. It's such a pleasure to be here. I want to thank you first for providing me the opportunity and the platform by which we can discuss an issue which is very current in terms of our own country and, in fact, the region and the world by extension. So I'm very pleased to be here today.
Yes, and we did a previous interview where you told us everything about who you are and some of the roles you've played in the past. And what I will do, I will just go ahead and post it in the comment section so that when this particular interview is over, our viewers can go back and listen to that previous interview and just get a better sense of who you are. But let us go ahead and get started with the conversation by you just telling us, what are you witnessing on the ground with regards to our young people?
All right, good evening again. As many Dominicans know me, I've been at the forefront of youth development, both at the community and national level for some time now. And in fact, all my roles have placed me in a position whereby I could observe and come to understand some of the challenges that we're experiencing. Most of which was seen firsthand when I was the president of the National Youth Council of Dominica. What I can say is that Dominica's youth are faced with a particular challenge, and it is also important to understand that we have a very big youthful population. The UNICEF puts our youthful population between the ages of 15 to 19 at 11,600. But obviously, there's a lot more persons maturing to the age 35, whereby the official youth age ends. The challenge, or rather the issue which confronts us most in Dominica, is unemployment. And I've made known that to our Dominican public in the past, and I'll continue to do so. What we have is that we have an over demand or a very high demand of young persons seeking employment and a very little supply. And in that case, the underdeveloped private sector is unable to fully sort of absorb the talent base that we have, and that continues to be a challenge. Of course, if you have a young individual being unemployed, it also means that the number of social issues can arise out of their unemployment. In most cases, crime, violence, teenage pregnancies, and the likes. There are some efforts to address the youth unemployment, but it has not been significant enough to bring forward a sort of remedy in the problems that we're experiencing. Um, the problem of youth employment did not begin, or rather, it didn't start overnight. And the World Bank, UNICEF have been monitoring that for some time now. And I must say, the statistic is very alarming. For example, the World Bank puts our unemployment rate at about 27.8%, whereas UNICEF puts it at almost 40%. So that is rather frightening. It means that one in four young persons are unemployed. Now, unemployment means that you must actively be seeking employment. In the absence of an agency or organization to properly track and monitor unemployment, we as leaders and also policyholders at large rather cannot fully come to understand and grab the terms of how and the extent to which persons are unemployed. The reports also seeks to highlight that in most cases, because there has been a heavy focus on academics and training persons in that particular regard, it means that persons are less and less persons are involved in vocational skills training, which is in that case provides a more lucrative opportunity to work.
Yeah, thank you for that. So, thank you for that, Paul. And I think the conversation is off to a great start. Let us say good evening to everyone who's joining us on Facebook already. We have Saran John Charles, Royston Francis, Gary John, great to see you, Moody Davis, Emon Roll. So please go ahead and share the live. Let everyone know that we are here for this very important conversation. And we also want to hear from you. We want to hear your thoughts. We want to hear your recommendations. Maybe there is something that you're doing in your particular area of the world that may help with the unemployment rates in Dominica. So, this is what this forum is all about. It is about exchanging ideas. And yes, we may not have a national policy with regards to employing our young people, but what can we as individuals do to fill that gap, to fill that vacuum where there's not a national employment program? Well, unless if you consider NEP, right, Paul? So
Well,
let's
you know,
so let's talk about
The
NEP,
NEP
Paul.
is one. Well, I'm happy you asked because I actually just contributed to an article on DNO, which highlights some of the issues confronting young persons. And the NEP program, in the way it was created, as it rightly indicates, is provision of internship for individuals seeking employment. The expectations is that the private sector would absorb the individuals or the public sector would absorb them. But it is at a point at which it is a recurring, quite a recurring expenditure. It's almost an aspect of social insurance, if you want to consider it. Although the intentions was to provide individuals with job relevant skills in order to advance within the public or private sector. But again, as I mentioned, the idea that the private sector is so underdeveloped, meaning very few companies in terms of entrepreneurship and small businesses and startups, not existing or not being created in a pace which would allow for them or these interns to be absorbed. One of the major concerns about the National Employment Program is that it does not provide an opportunity for much longer term employment. Hence, the reason, rather, thus meaning that individuals are unable to benefit from any serious employment benefits like retirement and the likes. And it is unfortunate enough that it does not provide you with sort of the credibility to seek financial assistance from the relevant commercial banks and credit unions.
Yeah.
So,
So
as
for
much as
those
the
for those
arrangement as much as the arrangement was the intentions of the program was good from the onset, it is really defeating the purpose, and it is to a lesser extent creating a cycle of poverty. If you
Right,
if
right. Because for those who are less familiar, because we have non-Dominicans who watch our programs as well. So the idea was to create a national internship program where our
precisely.
young people would be outsourced to different businesses with the idea, as in many internship programs around the world, that they would gain employment from those businesses. But because, as Paul is saying, our private sector is not that developed, there are
Right,
really not that opportunities for the young people to then move into full-time employment where they will
exactly.
get other benefits. So the NEP does not provide benefits. For example, you can't go to the loan and get to the
No,
bank
and
and get a
that is
loan.
rather unfortunate because
And that is unfortunate.
persons on the program have been there for many years now. The program, if I'm not mistaken, was started anywhere from 2013, and because of that, the lingering effects would mean that persons would be repeatedly contracted to work, but at the same time having certain needs and not being able to capitalize those needs provides a really dull opportunity for them, if you ask me.
And Pam is already jumping in on the conversation. She says, unfortunately, I can't watch all of this live as it is after midnight in the UK. Pam, we
Oh, I'm
certainly
sorry.
understand. But
You
you
can
know,
always chime in after.
you can always come back and watch the program. So thank you for joining us, Pam. Imperative to encourage development of the private sector.
Yeah.
She is so right. That is where it starts. So let's say good evening to Evangelist Princess Sherman Christopher, Shari Bryant, Dion Filbert, Clint Peters, Cyrus Regis, Nelly Flowers, Miguel. So thank you guys. Thank you for being here. Don't forget to share the
And
live
thank
as
you
we're
as well.
having this very important conversation. So Paul, go ahead. What else are you noticing? Because what are the implications of all this unemployment that we see in our young people in Dominica?
Well, there are two sides to that coin. Unemployment creates not only income poverty, but it also creeps in regards to your whole self worth, the psychology, mental health as well, and increased levels of stress and frustration. So while we're seeking to address or rather create opportunities, young persons are without the doubt having an extremely hard time in respect to their families and their communities. And most of that you see spilling out into the wider community in terms of the increase in crime, narcotics, and teenage pregnancy and the like. So what in economics is considered in that case not just only a ripple but the multiplier effect of not being able to employ these individuals mean that they become a problem for the larger society. And then just recently, I was making the comment the way the system is organized essentially is not the problem. The problem really is at the level of the policymakers and the ability to sort of create the enabling environment whereby persons can be gainfully employed. And the buck really just stops there. So, I mean, it doesn't take much to notice the Dominican economy. The businesses that we see have been existing for over 100 years or almost in most cases. They have been there, but there's only so much they can do. And in less than favorable economic environments, they will not be motivated to expand. And that is really where the challenge is. So,
Well,
young people,
not just that, Paul, but also we see many of those businesses essentially are closing as well. I think you're stuck for a minute, so let's give you a couple of seconds because I know the internet in Dominica
yeah,
is not the most
forgive
reliable.
again the challenges of small island developing
That's okay.
states.
We're gonna work through it, Paul. We're
And
gonna work
please,
through it.
please forgive me. I have no
Yes.
control over that.
Yes,
So,
absolutely.
right, at least it's only a few seconds.
Yes. Go ahead.
As I was indicating, the private sector in an environment which is not conducive enough for expansion will not expand. You have to understand businesses get into businesses not just to solve problems but also to make a profit,
Right.
and they will do so. Now the wage bill or the employees they have is a recurring expenditures, and it's a heavy expenditure in most cases, as we're seeing post pandemic and even pre pandemic. From the economic shocks from the Hurricane Maria and Erica, and also the financial crisis, means that companies will always try to trim the fat, so to speak. So what we have also notably is that on an annual basis, a lot of persons, because of the introduction of secondary education, universal secondary, pardon me, and also the increase in tertiary education in terms of government scholarships and the like. Many persons are being trained. So the question is that not that persons do not want to begin fully employment. They are making the sacrifices, whether in part or whole, to begin fully employed. But in returning to Dominica, for the case of those overseas or for those who are on island and coming out of the school system, may not be able to get a job. In fact, the
Right,
UNICEF,
because it always baffles me. You know, we stress so much the importance of education, and I'm a huge fan of education. I'm sure you know that. But
of
I
course, yes.
always think, well, where do Dominican young people get employment? I keep hearing about NEP, I keep hearing about Clare Harbor, but
Right.
where are the jobs in Dominica? I'm always baffled by that. And the other thing that comes to mind, Paul, is we recently had this legislation where I think it was 2 ounces of marijuana or something
Wow. Yeah.
has been
28 grams.
legalized in Dominica,
Yeah.
and I'm just thinking of how all that just comes together to create a less than favorable society.
Yeah, well, the question of the legalization or decriminalization of marijuana is something that is ongoing in Dominica and the Caribbean by extension. But it has to be noted that there are many economic benefits that can be derived from the legalization or decriminalization. But recreational use of marijuana in an economy which with very employment can only mean problems for us, if you understand what I mean.
Mhm.
Because in most cases, that is where young people sort of gravitate towards to let go steam or the frustration that they're currently experiencing. So that really has to be monitored very closely and really assessed against our economy. Now, as you were speaking, I was thinking just now, Dominica, I've been monitoring the economics of Dominica, as I'm also a student of economics. And what I have come to note is that we are essentially a retail economy. And by retail, it's a mere buy and sell, as you can see in terms of the retail stores, anywhere from lumber to common grocery or department store merchandises. What we would need to do to address fundamentally our unemployment issue is to become producers. Because
Mhm.
by becoming producers, it means that we can get involved in the creation and setting up of processing plants and the likes. We can get our young persons actively involved in that process, and it would create a huge sort of like a vault whereby more young persons can be gainfully employed, especially in, for example, the productive sectors. It is also important to note, and I must stress, Dominican young persons are extremely talented individuals.
Absolutely.
And many of them have very, very wonderful ideas of which they would like to set up enterprises and in turn create employment for others. So even the whole question of support for entrepreneurship has to be underscored. If we get more young persons, some of which are already doing well, to do better and to create an avenue for new entrepreneurs to enter the private sector, then we can already begin to address some of the problems. As I indicated, the UNICEF puts our youth. I consider that as prime youth. It's 11,600, based on the last census that was created. So it is not a sizable amount of persons. However, the rates of unemployment in that in that strata or subcategory of the population is extremely alarming. And if I must note, it's 40%. So that can well
That's
imagine. Yeah,
incredible.
it's very frightening. When I was reading the report, for me, it was really frightening to know that so many persons, based on the numbers, are unemployed. If you take a stroll along the street, you can see it on the blocks and the street avenues around the communities. You can get a sense that people are not actively involved in the economy. But entrepreneurship, small business development, productive sectors, even the whole question of a person's intellectual property in terms of music, art, and the likes. I mean, I'm not going to sit here and shy away from the fact that we have not gone anywhere. And I'm not going to try to sugarcoat anything to sort of please anyone. If
Right.
you use Dominica and you measure it against some of the other islands, you will know that we have not gone anywhere. I'll use a very classic example. For example, in wanting to meet with you tonight, I sat in my room and I was considering where in my district I could go and sit and have a conversation with you, and that is non-existent. It means that there's certain facilities, there's certain sort of amenities that is necessary for young persons, because while we are young, we are also prone to a lot of distractions. But if we concentrate on all the energies of young persons and we are able to harness then we will have less and less problems in
And
the
you know,
society.
Paul, that brings to mind a very important point that you mentioned, that is there was no place you could go with
There's
in terms
none.
of reliable internet. Because if you think of it, the world is now very flat because of the internet. There are opportunities all over the world for gainful employment. There are websites like Fiverr,
Hmm.
gig.com, or something like that, where you can use your own skills to
Right.
make. I wrote a book called Push Past 10, right? The cover
Hmm.
of my book was designed by a young man in Nigeria, right? The format of the inside of the book was done. I wrote the book, but the formatting of the book was done by a young man in Indonesia. What
And
do
you
they have access to, Paul? A laptop and the
exactly.
internet, and they have their skills and they're able to market themselves. So I hear a lot of people talk about the need for factories in Dominica. Oh, there are no factories. Forget the factories. Give young people reliable internet service. Tell them what skill do you have that you can monetize, and open the world to them so they can work from Dominica and be employed anywhere in the world.
Well, I'm happy you brought that up, and that was something I wanted to address later down in the program. You're really speaking about the digital revolution, and
Yes.
and that is an opportunity that has taken the world by storm, and many persons are grabbing, really just grabbing that. But in terms of Dominica, I cannot say that to any great extent. I know, for example, that there was the work online that was created, but you have to also appreciate that those programs are often very how you call restricted, and the
Yeah,
persons who
it's
read
60 people,
the
Paul. 60
exactly
people. I
the
looked into
persons who
it. I
want to
looked into it.
participate never get it. And in designing policies for young persons or program, it must mean that it has to be proportionate to the larger population, be it the youth or the total population. If opportunities such as that are being presented or made available, it has to be far reaching. Now, the question is not that young persons don't know how to do it, but they want to do it in a very organized and structured manner. And in most cases, when I'm speaking, whether on your platform or anywhere, I never, I never take the role of the individual who wants to flog or who wants to bring brickbats on young persons, because when you do that you antagonize them. So work online Dominica was created, but it is only for a limited amount of person, which is not proportionate to the larger population, and as a result a number of persons fall for the crack. But digital revolution and the likes and the opportunities that are available, therefore, it is very far reaching. And you're right, because I had an example. I placed my my resume once on career, I think career.com, just to beta it, so to speak. And I had to turn off a lot of my email settings and funnel all these things to spam, because the amount of requests and requests for meetings and the like that was coming through, it was overwhelming. But these informations have to be readily available for young persons. I think in Dominica we have to take the approach of almost like we want to be, in all cases, leaders are meant and should be teachers and share information widely, because knowledge really is power.
And I think it's too much waiting on the government. I think there's
Well,
too
of
much
course,
waiting
yeah,
on
I
the
mean,
government.
the
Those of
government is
us who know should find a
exactly.
way to impact the knowledge onto our young people and open the floodgates and say, hey, what about this idea and that idea? But we have quite a few people chiming in on the conversation, Paul. So
Okay,
let's
how
make sure we're
nice.
taking their comments. So
How nice.
Sabina says the intention of the program, the NEP, was great and it could have been a great development for Dominica, but it was misused as a political tool. And as Paul said, the purpose has been defeated. Absolutely. Pam says mindset is important too, so important. Where there is a need, there is an opportunity for a service. I've had online work done by people in Bangladesh and
Wow.
Morocco.
Yeah.
Last name Man says, I think the positivity coming from this young man. I like the positivity coming from this young man. And it's true, Paul. I've been an
Thank you.
online learning
Thank you.
professor for the last 14 years, and I have students all the way in Germany,
Exactly.
you
So
know?
we want the mission, so to speak, is, as much as we might assume that Dominica is an open, sort of open country relative to the rest of the world, a lot of information don't reach us. For example, you'd be surprised that in most cases, and young persons, I'm not I'm not bashing you in any way, but I'm only suggesting that the internet is not just Facebook and WhatsApp.
Right.
Okay,
And
there's a
TikTok.
lot more out there, and we want to encourage you to go in search, and to also make linkages and set up networks by wanting to be introduced to persons across the world, so that you can come to understand what experiences they're having in their respective countries as opposed to what you're having in your country. And you must always note that at the end of the day, as leaders, we exist to help you. One child left behind is a serious problem for any country.
Yeah, and you know, Dave Bertrand says it well. He says, well, good evening, Dr. Matthew Paul and the listening public. The government has killed the hopes and aspirations of our young people. That might be true, Paul, but what are we as the citizens? And I keep saying Dominica is not just Dominica on the ground, it's our international community. So together we make up about 200,000 people. So,
Right.
what are we, even if the government is not playing its role, what can we as an
Well,
international community do?
the gentleman is right to suggest that, and I'll let you know that before I answer the latter part of the question. He's right to suggest that because leadership is everything. And in most cases, we as individuals, we put our hopes and aspirations in leaders to give proper direction and guidance. Now, in the absence of that direction and guidance, people go wanting. So that has to be underscored. And you will regularly find in Dominica, in most cases, when people see that they're disadvantaged, they make reference to the government. And they have
Yeah.
every right to do so because the government is the chief custodian of the people of the Commonwealth of Dominica, and their responsibility thereof is to create the enabling environment whereby they can exist. In respect to the international community, or what is commonly referred to as the diaspora network of Dominicans, I've always been very interested and concerned at the same time about the number of Dominicans living overseas. And I've always seek to sort of encourage Dominicans to adopt a child, so to speak, not in the sense of some legal adoption or the likes. For example, there was once I was speaking with my colleague and I told him that, your breakfast, the steak that you have, it could cater for some books and bags for children. Because, there are a number of young persons in Dominica that are still very impoverished and not having some of the basic amenities that they need to function. And so, because of that, I believe what I want to say essentially is to encourage Dominicans living overseas to take a very keen interest in your community, Grand Fork, Grand Bay, La Plaine, wherever you may exist. When you visit home, or you can find out, speak to someone on the ground and find out if there are some persons there that you can have an impact in their lives. That's my advice.
Yeah, yeah, and you know, you're preaching to the choir, Paul, because you know, with this platform, and of course, I have another program on Q95 called Roots Connections. My goal is to do exactly what you're saying,
Oh,
create
nice.
that linkage, because there are folks like me who are adamant. We've left Dominica 20, 25 years ago, but our
Right.
heart is in Dominica. And I
Exactly.
want to create, I want my legacy to be a mentorship program that links Dominicans overseas to Dominicans on the island, and via technology show
Right.
what we are able to achieve so that these young people have better opportunities, better economic opportunities. But I also like that one of our audience members, and I truly appreciate the comments, so keep them coming, mentioned the importance of mindset,
Well,
because
of
I
course.
think what we're seeing is when children grow up seeing their parents themselves struggling, it does not teach them to become creative thinkers. They don't learn to
Right.
think outside of the box. They don't learn to think beyond what they see around them. So they don't learn to be, you know, entrepreneurs. They don't learn to take risk, right? So I want you to talk to us about the importance of mindset. And I also want you to include that in the work that you're doing with the young people that you're going to schools. I know that you're doing quite a bit in that area.
All right, thank you. And the individual who commented is very, very correct to suggest that. In sociology, society is looked at as a biological organism, and there are certain agents of that society. The family is chief and paramount to that. And in most cases, when you see families are considered to be dysfunctional to any extent, or rather not creating a conducive environment, it also could mean that the offsprings or the children within that family sort of adopt the same modus operandi of the parents. Now, bearing in mind that is a much larger and deeper conversation in terms of our post-plantation societies and the effects that colonization has left lingering in our communities. One of the things that I normally encourage when I go to the schools to speak to the young persons is to increase uh, their ability, or rather to spend more time reading, for lack of a better way of putting it. And in most cases, I challenge them to read at least 15 minutes a day. For example, I'm a very avid reader. I can read for up to 3 hours every day because I recognize how important reading is. And when I go to the school, I normally speak to the young persons there, and I said, guys, I really want you to spend more time reading outside of the classroom, and don't limit your education to just within a formal or within the classroom, because the greatest ability any human has is the ability to read and to compute, make basic mathematical computations. And because of that, if you have the ability to read and comprehend, then you yourself can charge yourself with the own responsibility of doing more. And I also encourage them to get their parents involved so that the parents can also monitor them and encourage them to do the same. With respect to the current school tour that I'm doing, it's no different to what I've done in the past. I have gone through the length of breadth of Dominica throughout many high schools and primary school, speaking to young persons I believe that the best time to have that interaction with them is when they're very young, and you'd be very surprised that they still do remember the conversation sometimes when I'm in different communities, and they can identify and make reference to that which was spoken about. Currently I'm doing that in the Kalinago territory, which is my hometown, and I've already gone to two primary schools, and Siniku and also Atkinson. I'm speaking to the students of grade six because they're on the point of getting ready for the national assessment, and there's a component of their syllabus which speaks to governance, civic responsibility, and also leadership. So what we're doing essentially is helping them to understand how important governance is to them, even as individuals, be tied through the Ministry of Education or their local representatives and the likes. In all cases, the Kalinago chief and the parliamentary representative. I also inform them about the political process, and you'd be very surprised how much they already know, because I guess through their parents or in the community, they can already identify what is involved in the political process and how it informs and how it also is important to their own very lives. And of course, the question of leadership, meaning that what are the qualities of leaders? And when I speak to them, I don't limit the conversation and make it sort of abstract. I identify everyone in the classroom as a potential leader themselves. So it's just a way of helping them to build their aspirations, and also to understand what is important in their lives, even if they're still very young. Yeah.
Yeah, but I cannot stress enough the importance of that mindset, Paul, because that is where it all stems from, having the right mindset, instilling that. And that is why I think that mentorship program that I referenced before is so
Right.
important, because here you will be able to look at someone like me who comes from an alcoholic father, a mom who had a third grade
Wow.
education,
Yeah.
right? But because at a very young age, I was always a student. So I would always look around my community and I would look for what I did not want to be. So I
Wow.
would, no criticisms at all. Please don't think I am judging or criticizing anyone, but I would look at the single moms in the community and I would
Hmm.
think to myself, not for me. Right.
Wow.
And I always knew that the path to my success would be education. So I
Right.
was laser focused on how do I get out of Dominica to pursue an education to potentially come back and make an impact. I was unable to come back and make an impact, but thanks to technology, I think that it is great that we can now all make an impact, because now it
Wow.
doesn't matter where you are. We have the
Precisely.
technology, and love is a verb. So if you
Exactly.
love Dominica so much, I have a challenge for you. Email me, reach out to me. Let us see what we can do. And a number of people have already doing so. And I'm grateful for that. And you're one of them because you're on the ground. So I can liaise with you. Now, I have a challenge for you, Paul. I
Okay.
know
Let me
that you're
hear.
an exceptional young man with great ideas, a brilliant thought process. What if the government gave you like a grant of maybe $100,000 and say, Paul Barron, do something for our young people? What do you
Wow.
think you would do, Paul?
Well, I'm happy. It's good that you could recognize that the potential exists.
Yes,
But
it
more
does.
importantly, it will not take just a sort of blanket approach towards addressing. If I were given $100,000, the first thing that would have to be addressed is to understand we cannot make decisions without data, and
Yes.
that continues to be a challenge. So I would really first begin by conducting a serious and comprehensive
Comprehensive.
study in terms of the extent of unemployment in Dominica, and that can be done easily through Google Docs. It's widespread,
Yep.
but we'd want to understand the extent to how disadvantaged young persons are. 100,000 is not not a lot of
It's
money,
not a
as you
lot of
already
money,
know.
but it's something.
So it would mean, more importantly, that monies would be spent around knowledge sharing and information, and sort of adding to the process of education, educating and informing young persons. But more importantly, it would we would need to know where they are exactly in order to begin to sort of plan for future objectives and goals.
And I really enjoy exchanging ideas with you, Paul. And one of the things that also comes to mind is that brain drain that our
Exactly.
Caribbean region has suffered from for so long. And people have a right to seek better opportunities. I did it. I can't judge
Well,
anybody for doing it.
you
But
can't
can
blame
we
them.
reverse it now, Paul? Can we reverse it?
Well, we have to make, right now is a very, very opportune time to reverse it. And you know what? Because the world is in shambles right now. Post
Yes.
pandemic, and also the Ukraine war can only mean more wars. It is only the beginning. This whole supply chain restrictions, I would not be surprised if there are Dominicans already facing that level of economic distress, because in some cases, lockdowns were more than almost 2 years, so to speak. We have to make Dominica very inviting and very attractive. But more importantly, there need to be a number of enabling environments that don't exist for Dominicans to sort of return to Dominica. So it cannot be done overnight, and it will mean that it has to take a much longer span of time to make the country to an attractive level, to sort of entice us to come back. So that is why, as you have rightly said, and I applaud the efforts that you're making regarding the mentorship program, is that we have to, I don't understand that there are Dominicans here who have a great ideas, who have hope for the future. But as persons in the diaspora, the level of mentorship that is required in Dominica is non-existent or almost non-existent. I'll use myself as an example. For example, the Paul Byron you know today would be a very different person had it not been for my first mentor, Mr. Kevin Dangoben, in third form in high school. I would literally be on the streets. But he saw
Wow.
something in me I didn't see in my own self. And because of that, he pulled me up and he said, Paul, you can do a lot better. You can do a lot better if you only apply yourself. And because of that, I have consistently throughout all my life embraced mentors. And in all cases, when I find myself not having a mentor, I go in search of one and I knock on their doors and I say, Guy, I recognize that you have done some amazing things in your life. Can you teach me how to do it as well? But not every young person is like that. Sometimes it means that you have to sort of search and find out and try to help address that deficiency. So it's a challenge for every Dominican. It does not take just the two of us. It won't just take just the two of us. There are many successful Dominicans throughout the world, and we're really just knocking on your doors to recognize that where we are, we want to do better. Fortunately, you have experienced the first world, or rather, the developed world, and now you can help share some information and knowledge as to how we can do better here as well.
Yeah, yeah. And I
Take
think
a
that
very
the
keen interest in your country.
Yeah, and I think reversing the brain drain that is possible because of the technology. And that is exactly what I want to focus on. But I'm also happy that you mentioned the role of a mentor in your life, because I think if we all think about it, somewhere along the line, there was somebody who inspired us to do better. And for me, it was my fifth grade teacher, Miss
Oh,
Annette
nice.
Williams. And you know
Okay.
what? She never said a word to me, Paul. You know what she did? She just gave me a little bit of attention,
Well,
right?
that's
So
amazing, and
when we
that's
were
sometimes
when
what's needed.
yes, when we were growing up, it was an honor if the teacher called you to go get a glass of water, clean the
Mhm.
board. I don't know now in school, but back then, those things meant you were special. And
But
she
of
would
course,
always call on me to get her a glass of water, to clean the board, to organize the little bookcase we had. And in my little 10-year-old mind, I thought, oh my God, I'm so special. How can I disappoint her? So
I know.
now I have to earn good grades because
Exactly.
I do not want to disappoint Miss Williams. And 20 years later, I was able to contact her, get in touch with her. She didn't remember me, and that wasn't
Wow.
important, because the
Wow.
important thing was, to this day, I remember her. So I think, it's just important for each one of us to think, how can we be that person
Yeah,
for
we all
somebody
need
who's
someone.
looking at us?
We all need someone, and the world right now provides an opportunity for that. Because COVID-19 was nothing short of a sort of wake up call for the entire world, the entire global community. We have seen, in some cases, the return of neighborhoods. We've seen persons result into things that would once considered extinct or non-existent in our communities. So it is really sort of ushering us to sort of change the approach that we have going forward. It just goes to say that however mighty and strong we might think we are as individuals, we can just really just go and lock down for a while, and our jobs can be taken away from us, our livelihoods can be taken away from us overnight. We cannot underscore that it has been a challenge for every government, Dominica, no exception. Been involved in leadership and governance. What I continuously hear, and it is important to note, is that most people find that in terms of Dominica's experience, where it means in terms of the political process and the likes, is that they want more, they want better, and that is not currently being provided. And it's a very simple message. So we cannot sort of isolate ourselves from the fact that the leadership that we have experienced throughout the years is really at the point at which I have made it very, very public before, in terms of something a sort of like bankrupt for ideas, so to speak. And I want to ensure you, Simone, firstly, and for your listenership, that we as leaders we should not and ought not seek to develop or make policies, formulate plans in the absence of young people, and that is a huge problem in the Commonwealth of Dominica. We have certain agencies that act on behalf of young persons, but without having sort of a connection, without knowing that they even existing to begin with, really is defeating the purpose. For example, you won't know what a group of young persons in Calibishi is thinking if you've never had an engagement with them. The challenge is very simple. The young persons already have the ideas. They know, they have spent years fashioning it. They understand what they want to do, but we have to bring them at the decision making table, and we cannot we cannot assume what they need in their lives, because they're the experts on their lives. We're the ones that are supposed to create the environment and capitalize these ideas. So I really wanted to underscore that it is important that as leaders, and whatever, wherever the leadership, and when I say leaders, I'm not only referring to leaders in government. Leaders exist in every facet of our societies, church, social clubs, everywhere else. We have to take a very concerted efforts and bring young persons together and to try to understand where they are and where they need to be. And it doesn't have to be done overnight. It can be over a period of time, but at least at a grassroots level. And I always remember Senator Isaiah Benwa, who I had the privilege to lead with at the National Youth Council. And he's always hold very, very, very dear to the aspect that Dominica has to always embrace a grassroots level approach towards development, on the basis that our communities are very accustomed of always having a sort of hands-on approach, or someone, or rather handheld approach, because you have to understand our population is very small,
Yes, sir.
very small. Everybody knows everyone. So information sharing is much easier as opposed to a country with a lot bigger population. But in sort of having this grassroots approach, going through the nook and crannies of Dominica and understanding the level of discomfort a young person has in Tukari, or understanding the level of challenge that a young man, a young lady has been at his mother home 2 years after high school, not getting a job. And what is it? Because you'd be surprised. You will show up at these in these communities, and all you need to do is to be a good note taker, and jot down the ideas and the concerns that they have, and then you can go and address it. But we cannot do so without really just engaging them head on. So I really wanted to underscore that.
Yeah, yeah, and thank you for that. And I'm happy you mentioned the National Youth Council, because that is where I was going next. I was
Oh,
going to
how
ask you,
nice.
what about the role of organizations such as the National Youth Council? What role are they currently playing, and what role do you think they ought to be playing? But before we do, let's engage the audience. Paul, as we
Sure.
always do, Sadiq CE says truth. Royston Francis, real talk. Love that one. Thank you, Royston. Shanika, great to see you. Good content, mindset shifting is key. Pam Clark, Pam, I thought you said you were going to go to sleep, but thank you for staying up with us.
Thank you.
Entrepreneurship and personal development is key. And then she adds, despite the dysfunction of some families, the right mentorship can break the cycle. So true,
Exactly.
Pam.
Exactly.
What youth groups do we have for teens, and do they tackle entrepreneurship and personal development? Pam, thank you for staying up late, and thank you for your wonderful comments. Royston, good job, Paul. Magdalene, I love the positivity coming from young Paul. Marley, good evening. Nice to see you, Marley. Kitchener, Paul, you sound just great. We will
Thank you.
have to put some of those ideas into practice. Thank you so much, Kitchener. Shanika, therein lies a powerful way to impact the lives of young people. The discriminant to see the potential in our young people, the discernment to see the
Right.
potential in our young people. Pam, churches, perhaps they should review their roles within communities. Cassandra, great to see you. Philly Lockhart, positive talking Paul. Thank you so much, everyone, for your
Thank you,
comments, and
guys. I
don't
really
forget to share the
appreciate it.
light.
Thank
You
you.
want to comment on anything from what everyone is saying, Paul?
Well, I just want to say how grateful I am that you all are participating to begin with, and also recognize that you, as a Dominican, have a very important role to play. And I trust that some of the recommendations that we're making that you will also adopt and seek to help us in Dominica transform this country to what my dad always say, its former glory. So
Right.
thank you very much, and your points are very noted. You
Yes, so,
mentioned the
so
national.
NYC and the
Right.
roles of youth organizations, civil society organizations.
Right. Well, the blatant truth is that the civil society movement in Dominica is not where it should be, and frankly, that is very alarming. There are a number of organizations which seek to address or to sort of bring about change regarding young persons and their development. But one thing I've noted and in my role as president of the National Youth Council is that organizations cannot exist without sort of a significant amount of funding. And what we have seen is that most of the civil society movements are considered a place where volunteerism is born and raised, and rightly so. It is very important, but in order to help them achieve their stated intention and policies, they need the monies to do so. And we have the National Youth Council as an organization which seeks to sort of bring young persons across the island and seek to address some of their needs. We do that in partnership with other strategic partners, the Division of Youth, and also social welfare, the Ministry of Youth, and some of the other agencies which seek to address concerns or issues affecting young persons. But without any serious level of money to do so, there's little that can be done. And you have to understand that in Dominica's case, communities are somewhat sparsely located, and the ability to reach young persons also can be a challenge. In my case, what I had done, and through borrowing from Josiah and some of the former presidents, is always just to be physically present and working through the various school systems and some of the subgroupings that exist in the various communities. But in most cases, those things, in order to do that, they cost. And there's a subvention that comes to the National Youth Council of $12,000, and that's not any money. And
Wow.
those monies are meant to take care of certain recurring expenditures and in some cases staff. If you look at DADP, if you look at the Division of Youth, I've always been, I have a lot of respect for the Division of Youth and the youth officers. I consider them as disciples, the work that they do in Dominica. But without having any serious amount of money in order to achieve some of the technical and vocational training that they're bringing out to the communities, it continues to be a challenge. Now, the structure and the structure of the Division of Youth, the National Youth Council, the policies, all of this exists extremely well on paper. It's bulletproof. And once we are able to do that, we will achieve our objectives. but not having the money to do so will continue to be a challenge. So my plea is that the authorities and the leaders of the day, who that might be, has to capitalize these organizations. For example, just take, for example, the Vision of Youth. Its responsibility is to go out throughout the length and breadth of Dominica and teach persons technical and vocational skills. They have gone a step further to introduce certain soft skills, which is extremely important: emotional intelligence, how you relate to people, communication skills, and the likes. Young people need that, and the Division of Youth can achieve a huge amount of success. But I'll ask you to make a random call to the Division of Youth, and you'll always find on top of all of the conversations that money is a problem,
Yep.
and
I hear that over and over again.
it continues to be so.
Hmm.
So I've always known when I got involved in leadership early on, when I was much younger. I've heard that our blueprints, healthcare, education, local government, these were the things, these blueprints were utilized in other Caribbean islands. And these islands have done extremely well with those blueprints on the basis that they found it to be extremely essential and capitalized these and made more out of it. And sadly, that cannot be said in Dominica. And I say that with a
Yeah.
reservation.
Absolutely. And I see, let's see, who did I miss? Opia Pascal. I don't think I shouted you out. Good evening. Thank you for being here. And Paul, I think you've been following my programs for a while. So, I'm very solution oriented. I'm not interested in having a conversation if we're not willing to talk about solutions.
Precisely,
So,
precisely.
again, I really want to thank you for reaching out to keep youth unemployment on the front burner. And here's what I'm thinking, because I've been paying attention to what you've been saying. And I think it is so important to have a youth forum. We
But
did
of
one
course.
back when I first started, and I really want to thank Mr. Alex Bruno because he was the one who brought it to my attention. So we
Mhm.
had a number of young people, including Whitney Milliner and a young man who
Right.
was just elected in the Kalinago territory. Last name, I believe, is Coffee.
Yes,
I forget his.
Dylan.
Yes, yes. So a number of young people were on that forum, and we spoke directly to them. But here's my concern, Paul. Everything is so politicized in Dominica. Do you think
Yeah.
we would actually be able to hold a Facebook Live youth forum and have young people speak honestly and openly about their plight, what they're experiencing, what they would like to see, the lack of opportunities? Would it be feasible? Would it be possible?
Well, you're looking at someone who now stands in defiance of everything that he took time to build.
I know. I've seen your other videos.
So the fact remains that largely Dominican young persons and Dominicans by extension, there's a great degree of fear of victimization. And I'll be very honest with you. The freedom of expression of which our ancestors fought for, and the freedom of speech that our Constitution affords us, and the United Nations Declaration on the Rights of Humans, is on a sharp decline in Dominica. And in most cases, people are fearful of losing their jobs,
Yep.
losing scarce benefits, and some very, what I consider to be petty reasons. And by mere association with an idea or individuals that is contrary to the dominant or ruling regime, is looked upon with serious precaution. So while I really do appreciate that the need does exist, and fortunately we're seeing more young persons coming forward, and young people are beginning to take a bolder step, so to speak, and voicing their concerns. Unfortunately, we exist now in the digital revolution where we can do so on social media, and even more fortunately, some of the comments and the openness that they share cannot be used against them, so to speak. But we would really want persons to be honest, because the electorate, Simone, is supposed to inform policymakers. The role of a population is to ensure at all times their voices and interests is being heard. And in the absence of that, the leaders really don't have a job. They don't have a purpose. And I want to really encourage young persons out there to make your concerns and your interests known, make your voices be heard. Because if you don't speak up and stand up for your right, uh, nothing will be done for you
But
because
Paul, let me
it's
let
not in the better interest of the the order of the day.
but let me chime in, Paul. You know, we live what we learn and we learn what we live. If young people are growing up seeing their parents not speaking up, what are the odds that they will learn to speak up? Let's just
Well,
be honest.
again, it's
Let's
it's
just be
it's a
honest and
vicious
frank.
cycle.
It's a
And
vicious
you have to
cycle.
understand that is what stems into the whole unemployment situation
Yeah,
because the parents want to guard their interests and they'd rather
right.
bring a loaf of bread to the table rather than a basket of bread. So they in
Hmm.
seeking to guard their interests and to protect the economic stability of their households, they go unheard. But the question is that the right thing to do?
Right. And what are you teaching your children?
My children are still very young.
I meant in
But
general.
I'm sorry, I thought that question was directed to me.
No, no, no. In theory, in theory.
But my
But
children are still very young. But you can bet that they will know exactly what to do.
yes, I know they will be very outspoken.
Exactly.
But let's take some comments. Let's see. Marva, the youth council and group can seek sponsors. Great idea.
Very good idea.
Magdalene Paul is making a very essential point. Financing is a problem at these organizations. There are also too many bottlenecks in the system. Ty Francis, good to see you. He must train the youth for the youth parliament. Oh,
Mm.
great point. So, Paul, as our time winds down, I want us to keep this
Wow, time
conversation.
flies by, huh?
I know. I want us to keep
Yeah,
this conversation going. You have my contact. You can reach out anytime, Marva.
absolutely.
It is fair to say they can voice their concerns that are affecting them and what can be done to help them. So, again, Paul, I want to thank you for reaching out. You have my contact. We want to
Sure.
keep this conversation going, but more
Thank you.
importantly, we want to work on recommendations that we can put into action with or without the
Absolutely.
government. So, kind of
Absolutely.
just give us, some final thoughts as we get ready to wind down.
Well, again, I really appreciate the opportunity for coming on onto your program. I want to, in terms of recommendations, the first that we should do to seek to address young persons and the crippling effects that unemployment is having on them is we need outside of the census. The census is done every 10 years, and it is really not keeping up to the pace of where we are at different times. We need to first establish an agency or bureau of some sort, which tracks and monitors the level of unemployment in Dominica, especially those who are seeking jobs, those who are marketable or employable, deficiencies in skills and the likes, and want to gather those information in order to inform policy. Again, you cannot make decisions without data. The question of the underdeveloped private sector is something that is continuing to be a challenge for Dominica, and more needs to be done in terms of the expansion of businesses and creating an attractive environment to entice businesses to come to Dominica. Dominica is in the Latin American and Caribbean region. And if it's one thing that some of the multinational corporations are always increasingly concerned about, or rather looking forward to, is the abundance of labor. And we have an abundance of labor.
Yep.
We want to also ensure that young persons are getting job relevant skills. There's just too much emphasis on a certain subject or academic areas that are very saturated in the Dominica society and the world by extension. The question about digital revolution, we want also to ensure that young persons can actively engage or be engaged in taking advantage of these
Okay, it's gonna hiccup for a minute and then he's gonna come back because internet in Dominica unfortunately is not very reliable. But I see Mr. Loftus Jura. Thank you for being here, Paul. Take it away. Go ahead.
So
You're back.
sorry, yeah, we had a glitch there. So the idea that the private sector is not expanding beyond its current state is also of concern, and we need to address that. And one of the challenges that we have in Dominica is that we need to review our taxation systems, and that will take part of a larger discussion. But in terms of the import duties and the likes, and also the affordability of doing business in Dominica also has to be looked at to a greater extent. Collectively, I believe we can get it done. But more importantly, young persons should take an active role in deciding the sort of direction in which the country takes, because we are essentially the largest strata within our population. We have a relatively aging population, which means that the responsibility to bring Dominica to the state that it needs to be really lies on our shoulder. It's a huge responsibility, but every society has gone through the same phase or stage that we're currently going through in Dominica. So
Right, right.
I hope
And
I
you know
did
the
justice to the
Oh,
discussion we had.
absolutely. Brilliant thoughts. I think a lot of people commended you, and I want to do the same. And you know, we
Thank you.
also have to focus on the job creators because I'm very happy. I see Mr. Loftus Jura on the Facebook Live. He says, great discussion, Paul. Paul is a
Thank
bright
you.
spark for youth concerns. But we also have to highlight the work that the Loftus Juras and the Suki of the worlds do, because you
Of
know we know
course.
Lofty has an electrical service. I personally know that he has trained other electricians in Dominica. Now he has a trucking service. So
Well,
guess
that's
what?
great.
He's not the only one running his business. He's employing other
That's
young
great.
people. So we need to
Congratulations.
bring, you know, Lofty into the conversation, Suki into the conversation, anybody else who has the ability to create employment and hire our young people. But Paul, we also have to have another conversation because I'm not on the ground. And again, I'm not judging anyone. But now what we're hearing is that young people don't want to work. And I'm wondering, well, is that the case because there
I
are no
stand
opportunities?
I stand in defense of that statement. I
Thank
actually
you.
read it. I had made a comment, the article I did on DNO, and someone commented that young people do not work. And I find that to be very, very, uh, a lack of a better way of putting it, has been ludicrous
Yes.
because you cannot you cannot assume or want to say that a young person doesn't want to work. Every
Mhm.
young person wants to work, but the question is, you should probably want to understand that the level of frustration that they have in not getting a job. You know, the file, Simon, there's a term that the employers use. We have you on file or something
Oh
on the
yes, yes.
application.
When you send your
Well,
resume,
that
I
is
know that. I know
common.
that well.
That is the most frightening word that a young person can get, and demotivating word that
Yes,
an
yes.
employer has to respond by saying that you're on file and we have to consider you when or if that position becomes available.
And you
Every young
just know
person
it's a
wants to
no.
work. The question
Yes.
is, there are no jobs. No jobs.
And you know, so you know, Paul, we have a lot to talk about because we
Yeah.
also have to have a conversation about the importance of preparing our young people. You know, I meet young people, I go out to shake their hand, and their hand is so limp.
Manners and etiquette.
And I'm like, how are we not preparing our young people? When you're having a conversation, look at me in my eyes. Give me a
Well,
solid handshake. How do you dress for an interview? How do you write a resume? So I think there is
precisely.
so much
Well,
work that we have to do.
there are a number of I don't want to call it systems, but we have to introduce a because a number of things that our school system seeks to do and the manner in which they prepare young persons, it's no longer consistent with the world and the pace that it is currently.
Right.
And you mentioned a very important point. Someone say we have to overhaul the whole education system. Probably they're right. Maybe not everything, but there are new aspects of preparing or educating young persons and making them employable,
Mhm.
that has to be prioritized on. So you're very right to
Mhm.
make that
And you know, as a
contribution.
matter of fact, we did a whole 2 hour program on Roots Connections on Q95 about are we pursuing the right careers. So what I will do, I will also post that in the comment section as well. But let's take some comments. Daisy, the producer, Thaddeus James, listen to my good longtime friend, Mr. Paul. Thank you, Daisy. Thaddeus does follow our programs. I'm sure
Thank
he'll see
you. Yeah,
this
yeah, I
live
know
and he'll
that
reach
is.
out to me. So, but thank
Thank
you for
you.
letting him know. Let's take some more comments. They're scrolling by so quickly. Andrea Tavernier, Curtly Girodo, I think she's calling someone. Pam says, thanks, Paul and Simone. Fascinating and vital conversation. Our young people are our future. They have to be a focus. I could not agree more.
That is
Dominicans outside of Dominica are generally ultra patriotic. I cannot agree with you more and want to help develop Dominica. The High Commissions can facilitate this. And she says, I need to have a conversation with you. Paul, look at what we're doing.
Oh
So
wow,
Pam,
that is great. That is great.
what I
That's
did,
great.
I included my email address in the comment section. I'm Pam. So it's pushpast10 at Gmail. I included it in the comments. So please reach out to me as well as everyone else who has an idea, has something to contribute. Magdalene, I totally agree with you. Pam, Jan Joseph, so true. Paul, Shanika, we need to have more extracurricular activities for youth.
That is true.
Absolutely.
Very
Thai
correct.
Francis, body language of young tells you they are depressed.
Very much
Curtly, bring Paul back.
so.
I agree.
Oh,
Bring
nice.
Paul back. Augustine, Mr. Barron, you are an inspiration to young people. The
Thank
Sima
you.
Roye, you are not totally correct, Paul. There are countless UG persons who don't want to work. Too many young persons who don't work. Too many of
Well, I
them
have
want
been
it
young,
now.
so
Listen, Paul, listen now. Too many of them want it now. I support the school system needs to do a better job to prepare our youth. So, we can have diverse
well, that is the beauty of
thoughts.
humanity, you know. We have to push against the fence in all cases.
Yes,
And I respect everybody's comment and opinions
yes,
and has
absolutely.
value to it.
Mother, Dominicans are achievers wherever they go, but the country is too divided. And Paul, I want to tap into all these brilliant thoughts that you have. So,
Yeah.
make some notes on some other conversations we need to have, whether it is
Sure,
how
no
do you
problem.
prepare for a job, how
No
do you
problem.
create your own opportunities. So, just prepare some notes and we can have you back on so we can continue this conversation. And if anybody has any suggestions, solutions, ideas, please feel free to email me at pushpast10@gmail.com. So again, thank you, Paul. Thank you for
Thank you
reaching
so
out. Thank
much.
you
I
for
had a
being
great
here.
time. Thank you so much.
Yes, and
Thank
thank
you.
you, Facebook, YouTube Live. Thank you for being with us. Don't forget to follow Push Past 10. If you're on YouTube, you can subscribe to the channel Push Past 10 and click the notification buttons to know the next time we go live. Again, I am Simone Matthew, and it is always wonderful to spend this time with you as we work to move our lovely nature island, Dominica, forward in so many different ways. So, again, have yourself a wonderful evening, and I will see you soon. Paul,
All right.
thank you again.
All right.
All right, take care.